Perfect. But can you see us? Can you see us already?
We are live. I can see you on Facebook.
Okay. Well, so excited to be back with Conversations from Home. And this time this is the first session of a whole month of love, wisdom sharing. And the aim of the whole month is for us to become more aware of the importance of healing, and also to become more aware of the variety of ways that we can choose healing. So this is, as we said, we're starting today with these amazing men, and we're going to be discussing something that relates to all of us and connects us all, which is nature, our world, and also looking at also from a perspective of our indigenous wisdom, and see whether we can connect a little bit more with that wisdom that belongs to all of us, really, and that I find that is a key, really, to our sanity, if we can go back to that old wisdom. So welcome everybody, and Christian is going to introduce you.
Well, these two beautiful men. Just a background, I met both Darvis and Ranald at the Katoomba New Men's Gathering. Beautiful Darvis is a musician, but he's also a founder of a charity called Wild Walkers, and he can talk to you more about that. And Ranald is a wealth of wisdom too. He's a script writer for films. He's a men's mentor, and he will be sharing Indigenous wisdom today. So welcome, guys, to our first Conversations from Home.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks, Christian.
So I might just get, if either one of you are connected to Facebook, you might need to just put mute on that.
Yeah. How do you do that?
I think go
to, but not technology.
So maybe go to the Facebook and just hit the little volume mute on the volume on the Facebook video.
Okay, I'm not connected to Facebook. Like I'm not streaming through for everything at the moment. So.
Oh, we're all good then.
Yeah.
Maybe, babe, if you can, Christian, if you can start by maybe connecting to that poem. Do you still have it? Or not?
Sorry, what do you mean?
You were going to read something? No, we're not going to do that.
That's okay. We're
done.
Okay.
Let's go on then. Let's dive into it.
All right. So, Darvis, nature. You immerse yourself in nature. Tell me a little bit about Wild Walkers and what it does for you from a healing perspective in your connection.
How much time do I have, mate? I'm not I'm not known for my talent of making a long story short.
Just pretend it's a check-in.
All right. So you just give me the time warning, man. Yeah, I guess if we went straight to the punchline, we are nature. I've grown up in Tasmania, and I'm seventh generation convict on both sides. So yeah, I grew up here, and I think Tasmania is a really fascinating place because it's probably the most polarized place on the planet when it comes to natural resource management. It was the birthplace of the green movement, the birthplace of permaculture. It's like it's a bit of a hidden icon in terms of its nature culture potential and its balance. 40% of its landscape is inside World Heritage. And 20 years ago, I was part of a four young cowboys that decided that we wanted to start a social enterprise in a big wild place in the northwest of Tasmania called the Tarkine. And up until that point, that landscape had only been really known for its controversy. 95% of its land tenure was outside of national park. So basically logged and mined, and we figured a great way to bypass the polarization surrounding the logging and the mining industry was to start a sophisticated high-end tourism industry. So that's what we did. So we started the tourism industry in the Tarkine in this giant wild place, the largest temperate forest in the country. And I've spent, I don't know, maybe 1,000 nights guiding people through that wild landscape over 20 years, 6-day expeditions. And what I got from that, we ran that company for 12 years. And the outstanding thing was the transformational effect of the place on people. That in no other sense had I found a context of community in the same way that had the same kind of power as the disarming effect of a wild place on the human psyche. And that was stunning for me, watching that unfold and watching a group of strangers begin the journey with this self-conscious social awkwardness of not knowing this random group of people coming together, 12 people coming together, and 6 days later departing like a family. And every single group without fail would say, gee, we're lucky. This has been the best group. And we never told them. Every group says that. You know, and what that really meant was that the landscape does all the work. It does. That's where the magic's at. And so everyone is blown away by the disarming effect of the experience, but they don't really know intimately, like we know, that the landscape does that with everybody. So it's a great leveler. And I departed Tarkine Trails. We sold it. It was a pain in the arse, basically. It was an enormous undertaking. And we basically took like a disproportionate responsibility for a huge bloody challenge. And I kind of departed with my tail between my legs and was really jaded with the tourism industry. And the thing that really touched me was the transformational stuff. And what I basically walked away with is I want to create a paradigm of a global wild communities where we go into landscape and we get rid of the idea that a wild place is about a 30-kilogram pack and an epic physical challenge. And we go back to our semi-nomadic Indigenous origins. So for me, the Indigenous nature of it's really important. And I'm really stoked to be here with Ranald because he's someone that I deeply love and deeply admire and has taught me a lot over the years in the men's work and taught all of us a lot with his experience in Aboriginal communities. And one of the things that I'm really passionate to bring into social narrative is a very careful but a really important distinction, and that is that we're all Indigenous. Mm-hmm. We're all Indigenous to planet Earth. If the Martians are sitting up there on the mountains of Mars looking back to planet Earth and listening to this conversation about who's Indigenous and who's not Indigenous, they're just laughing at us. Mm-hmm. They're like, you're all Indigenous. It's just that some of you are bitsers. You're scattered in terms of your heritage. And I think that's a vital conversation to have and a complex conversation. Mm. So Wild Walkers is about coming back to our own Indigenous nature, where we've all evolved from somewhere. We've all evolved from some place. And what that means for me is that when I come back into a wild place is just a concept, wilderness, a wild place. It's just a word. In reality, what I'm coming back to is what the universe does when you don't mess with it. Mm. And when I step into what the universe does when I don't mess with, when it's not messed with, I feel it's the most trustworthy part of my reality that I've ever experienced is stepping into what the universe does when you don't mess with it, because there's nothing built, there's nothing lost. It's just as it is, and it's so powerful in the natural principles that underpin it that the evolutionary origin of my existence feels at a cellular level that I belong here. This is my home. Mm. There's some deep kinship that we all have with wild places. And so Wild Walkers is about creating base camp trips for the community where we go out into the landscape and we just immerse ourselves like 30 minutes walk in and just base camp there and just hang out with people and watch what happens when you sit around a campfire and just allow the landscape to be the champion and get the kind of You know, the real art is just simply to get ourselves out of the way as quickly as possible. And from a guiding point of view, the art is to just simply be there to support people to go out and immerse themselves in the landscape. You know, I see myself as a bridge between nature and culture. So in that context, I've spent a huge amount of time in landscape myself. The important thing when we go out is not me, it's you. It's the people. And you know, I'm a part of the fabric of the experience, but everyone's an equal part of the fabric of the experience. And what we do when we go out is we break up into kind of like a tribe. So there's the cooking crew, and there's the ceremony crew, and there's the water crew and the fire crew, and everyone's playing an equal role. Last time we went out, there was Auntie Alison just sat around making wooden dragons around the campfire for 8 days with shells and driftwood. And that was her role, you know, and she felt like probably more than any other time in her life, she was deeply valued for her extraordinary art. Everyone was just fat, and she told the story about her art. You know, everyone's got a leadership potential and a role out there. It's a place where we can practice giving our gifts and practice leading something in a safe way. So
well,
yeah,
I was just going to mention, because I mean, how beautiful what you're saying, and how important it is for all of us to recognize that this is our home, because we put a lot of stuff in our mind, you know what I mean? Especially, I mean, I'm a migrant in Australia. Yeah. And it's such a multicultural country. But once we get rid of all that bull, you know what I mean? This is our home, and more than ever before, at the moment, we need to become more aware of it. Because once we have that sense of this belongs to me, it also brings a responsibility to take care of it. And I guess that's the other level that also is important to know, and to just to become more aware of, that we need to take care of this. This is the home that we live in.
Yeah, and the language that we've kind of evolved in regard to that with wild walkers, and it's just kind of it's a co-evolutionary process where the whole community sort of just chipping in and sort of helping to paint some important distinctions, is guardianship. You know, we've launched a YouTube series, and so episode 1 is up there, and in that episode I talk a lot about guardianship. And what is guardianship? It's an underpinning principle, you know. And so one of the things that emerges in a landscape is, as a result of the perceived risk in a landscape is quite high. Statistically speaking, that the actual risk is actually very low, but the perceived risk is high. So our senses are on, and our sense of, like, you know, it draws us and pulls us into our senses, because we've got this protection going on, knowing that if I trip over and fall here, I'm kind of screwed. So I've got to really be on my best game. And one of the things that emerges as a result of that is that it's a natural drawer of empathy. So if I'm walking out there with you guys, I've got a really heightened sense about where people are and taking care of, you know. So if we're walking through the dark, there's an exaggerated sense of taking care of not just the place, but each other. And that sense of guardianship is like a natural byproduct of a wild place. And so in that context, I think that whilst the political stuff in regard to protecting a wild place is vital, it's peripheral to connecting the community. It's secondary for me. From a triage point of view, if I'm to prioritize what's the highest priority, it's just get rid of all the politics. When you're out there, there's no need for politics at all. And in fact, it just detracts from the experience, and it's just about deep immersion. And everyone departs wanting to protect the landscape, and we don't have to say anything about that.
That's right.
You know, there's no identity politics. I'm not out there I'm not a green. I don't identify with any political movement at all. I'm flesh and blood, and that's it. There's no green under a microscope. You know, it's just,
I love it, because there's so many labels that divide us, and it's about time that we start getting rid of those labels, isn't it?
Totally. 100%.
And
Yes.
So I was just going to ask Darvis, this year's been very interesting in terms of people having to isolate, stay at home. And I was saying earlier to Nancy that I found that I saw a lot more people out in the streets walking, families together and things like that. Now, obviously, we live in the suburbs. We're not blessed with the having nature at our doorstep, but there are opportunities to do that, and it makes me think how we connect and then disconnect so easily from nature, given that we're natural beings, yet somehow we have this belief that we have to go out to nature, yet we carry nature within us. What's your feelings about sort of why we disconnect so easily? It's
a brilliant question, and it speaks to the center of what Wild Walkers is about. Like, basically, when we go out into landscape, we biomimic spaciousness. So spaciousness, like by definition for me, is a wild place. What are we in? We're in vast open space that's not interrupted by modernity, that's not interrupted by technology and distraction, that's underpinned by exactly what the universe does when you don't mess with it. So it's this vast, trustworthy spaciousness, and in which case, we're a product of our environment. So, the reason that Aboriginal identity is very vast, open and spacious is because they're a product of their environment. They are just mimicking the actual landscape. They're a direct reflection because that's their day-to-day grind. And the challenge is transformation in a wild place is really simple. Just come out. By all means, adding some intention to the experience and a reflective practice amplifies that by orders of magnitude. But the art is, how do I integrate and walk that experience back into day-to-day life? So the tagline for Wild Walkers is walking the wild back into the world. And what that means at an embodied sense is, how do I maintain spaciousness in day-to-day life in the face of all of the distractions and the things and the complexity that's hitting me? It's really easy in the landscape. I'm just like waking up. What do I do today? Chill out and go for a swim, eat some food, go for a walk, sip coffee with the crew around the campfire, play some music. Pretty simple.
And time becomes irrelevant.
Whereas in day-to-day grind, I've got 15 different versions of messages coming from every single angle. I've got calendars, I've got this, I've got the phone call, I've got Wi-Fi buzzing in my ears, I've got work obligations, blah, 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 blah. So how do I maintain that sense of presence and spaciousness and that guardianship of spaciousness in order that I'm a walking embodiment of that? And that's bloody really difficult. And it's been a really big challenge for me. There's a thing called post-wilderness depression. And so I went through that enormously when I was guiding. I'd go 6 days on, 6 days off, 6 days on, 6 days off. I'd go out and I'd feel on top of the world, and I'd come back to chop wood, carry water and constrict. And I kind of learnt to hate the world. And so now my art and my practice is, how do I convert that wild experience into a day-to-day practice so that I can maintain that spaciousness? And I still struggle with that. I just want to live in the wild. It's like this ideological part of me just wants to live out there, but that's not the reality that we have. So I think it's an excellent question.
And I guess that when what you mentioned about that we are nature, that's also the keys. And at the moment I connect with myself, I also create that spaciousness. And totally. Because not everybody that's going to be listening might be able to go for a walk, or might, depending on the circumstances. But the key to connect with ourselves. We have all the elements that our earth has. So we are nature. So that was so important for you when you mentioned that. Yeah,
exactly. And irrespective, it's like in Tasmania, we're particularly spoiled. But irrespective of whether you're sitting like a 10-day Vipassana meditation in a 5-story office apartment, that sense of spaciousness with enough contemplative focus is can totally be found. Like the natural landscape will definitely amplify that and make it easier. But it can be found even just in the back garden, you know, going, and then the appreciation of a small flower, or, you know, like an insect through a little glass, or, you know, like just that in the tiny, it's found in the reality is Earth doesn't have a boundary and say, you know, there's no kind of law in the earth that says this is where the wild begins. That's a human construct. That's just, we've made that up. But like at a deeply sensual level, we understand at a sensual level when we get into a wild place, because it just naturally disarms us. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, I am nature. I am guided and governed by the same principles of a wild place. And the art is just to remember that on a day-to-day basis.
And Ranald,
Yes.
that's beautiful share, Darvis, and it's a really, yeah, as we said, that it's such a wide discussion that can be had. And Ranald, the work that you've done with the Indigenous community, we were talking earlier, you've done it since the 70s, right?
Yeah.
What can you tell me about why Indigenous culture is so connected to nature? Like, it's, yeah, a bit like what Darvis was talking about. We're all Indigenous, but obviously stuff like rites of passage and ritual and stuff like that within the Indigenous culture is such a key for them.
Well, I think, you know, I suppose I should just sort of say that I was very fortunate as a young man to live and work in traditional community where there were still elders alive then who were from pre-white contact times. So they were actually in their area. So they were actually completely in touch with, you know, their traditional culture, obviously, of which a huge part was totally about the relationship with nature. And in fact, the whole culture was based upon constantly reinforcing the reciprocal obligation of the interchange between the people and nature. And, you know, they were nature. You know, one old man, who adopted me, my grandfather, he had this wonderful moment where he was interviewed by an anthropologist. And he said, you know, and the old man told him, I am Manda, the octopus. And this anthropologist said, so you know, you do realize, of course, that, you know, I gather that is your totem, but you realize that, you know, you are a man. And my grandfather said to this anthropologist, he said, yes, it's true. Sometimes I'm an octopus pretending to be a man. And it's completely, you know, and that idea of reciprocal obligation is completely to do with the responsibility to, you know, each clan, each person has a set of responsibilities in relation to the dreaming, their particular dreaming. And everything is covered in that. And not just, you know, the totemic animals, but certain winds, certain, you know, and not only that, but also, it's also like access through your life, going through a full ceremonial life. You get deeper learnings. It's also a map of the country. That's how you find yourself, find your way through the country, is knowing the stories. You know, and constantly building relationship. I mean, that it's really, really important to be able to ensure the continuation of species by ceremonies that are done for it, and that the land loves to be danced on, loves to be sung to, loves to kind of have the stories told. And spirit of place is a really, really critical thing. you know, where, and I've been lucky enough to, you know, like sort of live in Arnhem Land, to work with Nyunga in Western Australia, to work with communities in New South Wales. Spent 14 years taking groups out to the Pitjantjatjara and Warlpiri country in the Central Desert. And just realizing how spirit of place has a huge effect. And it affects the ceremonies. It affects how hard the rituals are, you know, to go through the initiations. If you're in country that's got no water and where you have to cover, you know, the tribal area is huge, covering 400 to 500, you know, like 1,000 kilometers or whatever, because there's a scarcity of species, whereas other areas, clans are packed together because, like in the north where, you know, there's lots of rain, there's, you know, like thousands of magpie geese, there's, you know, just a huge availability then. And so in those desert areas, it's almost like the rituals are way harder because survival's way harder. So, you know, that spirit of place operates still when take groups out to the desert. And we used to follow, like, say, a Nintaka trail, which is a giant parenti dreaming that ran for about 450 kilometers. And there's different stories of what happened to this giant parenti at different places. And that's how you find your way through the country. So there's like one place, for example, where he ate the mistletoe berries and then vomited. And we used to take people there and you see these rocks that are like, look like these mistletoe berries. And, you know, they're there, it's there in the place. And often our participants throw up there, they'd actually vomit and stuff. And because like that dreaming is passing through them, it's kind of available in the land. Then you get into that fascinating thing of which came first, the story or the place. And of course, in the Aboriginal sort of system, that time, the illusion of time, you know, there is just the now, and there's just all the time. Sure, there's the sort of, you know, the ancestral lineage, but the forces are there present in the land. Just the same as, you know, like you go to somewhere in Tasmania, like Port Arthur, where prisoners were treated incredibly badly, and then there's a massacre there. You know, I mean, it's a dark place. And then what happened with the Aboriginal people before that in that area, etc. You know, this, and we are passing through all of the time. You know, like there's places in Sydney, you know, where the Aboriginal people were welcomed. You know, my partner lives in that suburb, you know, where this doctor who had his place there welcomed them and allowed them to stay there. Even though it's really close to King's Cross, it's an incredibly peaceful area there. It just is. You can just feel it. You can feel the energy in that place. Something horrible hasn't happened there in that particular kind of place. And
I was gonna, sorry, Ranald, and I was gonna ask you that actually. How do we, as a city people, you know, as a city person, make some peace with the land where we're living in? You know, we have people at the moment buying land, constructing on the land. How can we become a bit more aware of that sort of thing? And I'm just going to mention something because I just read the other day something about there's many streets in Sydney, or I think in Australia, that are called boundary. And this, apparently the story of the name of the street is that was the boundary for the Aboriginals, and at a certain time they had to actually go to the other side. They were not allowed. We actually happen to live in a boundary road, so we're just wondering how can we make peace with that? How can we create a healthier relationship with the land that we're living on? Yeah.
Well, what the most important thing is to communicate with it and build relationship with it, like talk to it. You know, this is the thing, is that, and this goes for your own body as well in exactly the same way. I mean, you know, like the Nunkries, the clever, you know, the healers that I worked with for 14 years, you know, like this is sacred country, you know, in us. It's full of sacred sites. It's full of everything that's happened to you, everything that's happened to your lineage, your ancestry is all recorded there. It's all in your DNA. It's like the micro, just the microbes in your stomach area, etc., etc. The whole sort of, you know, what's going on in your kidneys, all of that. That's part of the great web of, you know, of the whole planet, etc. And this is before we even mention spirit and consciousness. You know, one of the great sort of marvels for me, like working with these nuncries that I work with, you know, like say, I might even have a picture of them here, but say these, you know, these two old men, like this one and this one, they were the two main teachers for me. And they would actually come to me in dreams and take me places and show me places. And then depending what and then they'd say the next day, oh, anything happened last night? You know, like, and then depending on how much you were able to tell them, then they'd reveal the next level, you know, and because they are like what we call the subconscious in our culture, they are, you know, those old people were so adept in that area. And, you know, in the area of dream, that whole sort of dreamscape is a whole kind of like world and reality. And it's got a dark side too. So that's where sorcery can happen in that realm, you know, but also survival, where those that could go to a waterhole in a major drought in the desert, who could actually send themselves there to see if there was water in that place, so whether to move, whether to walk to that area, etc. You know, that's a whole area. And the whole thing about mental health, you know, this is mental health month, etc. You know, this is the sort of direct answer to your question, is part of our mental health is building relationship, is building connection with each other, but with country, you know, and part of that is constantly recognizing, you know, a lot of Aboriginal stories are really heavy. You know, they really deal with dark impulses in us. But what they do is they create in ceremony, they ritually acknowledge those things. The stories of, you know, things like incest, incredible violence, theft, stealing, murder. You know, a lot of those stories sort of like deal with those kind of darker parts of us, etc. And they're dealt with ritually, and they're dealt with by creating really, really strong containers so that they can be ritually acknowledged, the dark as well as the light, as well as the beauty and the love and the generation of things. I mean, nature isn't all about beautiful flowers and beautiful things. There's things out there, you know, like eating each other, you know, like kind of fighting for dominance, taking out weaker things. Don't get into this romantic notion. Part of our sickness is that we deny those kind of like impulses and try to go for dolphins and crystals and the beautiful sunrises and sunsets. And then, oh, that Donald Trump is so nasty, you know, without getting that we are all of it. And that's what Darvis is talking about. That's what immersion in nature. I mean, when you have to cross crocodile-infested rivers to get the best barramundi, then you start to feel what being alive is really about. And I know what he talks about. I mean, it's like I you know, when I came back to the city, everyone looked sick. Everyone looked really sick. And then I became sick because I went from this incredibly natural man who was totally in touch with, you know, with tides, with the phases of the moon, with, you know, just completely open in all my senses, because I had to be to survive in that kind of area. So, you know, it's a really, and this is what, of course, the effect of colonialism on Indigenous people in this country was kind of horrific, because, for example, part of that intimate relationship with nature was ensuring ensuring the thriving of species, and through increased ceremonies. So ceremonies that ensured, and you can get taken, like you can be going out and get taken by the old men to some place way out in the middle of nowhere. And there's a sort of a site there that's got, you know, just this incredible, you feel the power of it. And it's something like it's the mulga apple site. So these tiny little things. This is the generation point for it. This is while they'll go in, they'll sing the mulga apple song, they'll interact with this place, etc. That was one of the first things that got lost. The boundaries, what the boundaries do was cut them off from being able to get access to, you know, sacred water holes, for example, where for cattle or immediately, well, that's what, well, we'll have that because that's a permanent water supply. But people weren't allowed to go near those because they're also like, you weren't allowed to hunt there because that's also so the species can absolutely propagate in the best conditions. And there's only certain times, a very limited time, you could get access even into those areas. And, you know, this complete management of the resources, etc. And of course, you know, you ask like, why, you know, like, why do we, you know, we came from a thing from a culture, you know, where nature was just a backdrop for our great deeds. It was a resource to be exploited. So that's a completely different awareness. It was the same when I was in the States with Native American people, you know, and they talk like, you know, they pray out loud, you know, not silently. You know, you can be with 30 others and everyone's praying out loud at the same time. You go to a Sundance, you know, and you don't dance for yourself. You know, you go through this incredible ordeal, like, you know, 4 days, 4 nights without water, without food. You're dancing from dawn to dusk. You're pierced through here. You're attached to this tree. You're going all day. There's men on the drum. There's, you know, like the fire's going 24 hours for those whole things. And you're doing 2 sweat lodges, one before dawn and one after, without any water. Believe me, you know, like you know, it's but you're not doing it for you. Mm-hmm. You are doing it like for your community, for somebody who's sick, for somebody who's addicted, for somebody. There's that, and that's what maturing through all of the levels of initiation are about, is going from being a child where it's okay to be selfish and normal to gradually getting more and more concern for others, for the world, for the other than human. See, it's this Anthropocene, which is the assumption that humans are the most important and that everything should be geared around what, you know, humans. Like, we've got to get the economy going back, you know, whereas nature's actually had a reprieve, you know, but, you know, we just have this, we don't even realize the degree to which we are self-centric and species-centric, and we're the top of the pole, you know, and that's what the Earth peoples understand. That's what Indigenous peoples understand. That's what being an octopus is about. That's what sort of being the northwest wind is about. You know, it's actually realizing that, you know, we are, you know, like the Kalahari Bushmen, you know, the praying mantis is God. This tiny little thing, you know, it's completely, we don't realize how insane we are as a culture. That's the thing. Like, you know, we are insane as a culture, and we are so disconnected on the, you know, these things you talk about, you know, the 4 pillars, you know, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the energetic, and spiritual. Well,
I like the idea, and definitely I agree 100% with you, Ranald, and I'm really actually very, very positive at the moment that we are in transition in regards to the evolution of our consciousness. And yes, we are, and I like that idea that yes, we are children. And we are going through an initiation. And if we can join in this initiation, we can mature, because we have been acting like children. And what you said, we got this backdrop of Mother Earth. What can I get from it? What can I get from it? But at the moment, we are in a moment that we realize that if we keep taking and taking and taking, we might not survive. I mean, the Earth will survive. I always say that the Earth will survive. We are taken out of the equation, and nature goes back to normal. But we need to start taking care of ourselves, really. If we don't connect to nature again, who knows what's going to happen with humanity? Yeah. Because we're another species. We're really another species in this world. We're not it. So I like that idea of looking at it as we are children, and let's grow, really. Let's use this as an initiation.
And to get back to your original question, I think it's also really important to realize that, you know, you can't, I mean, I've had the privilege of all of that, you know, like years and years, 45 years of contact with Indigenous and Earth peoples. So it's really important for people to start where they are, like in their own backyards, fine, or with their pet cat, or with their pet dog, or with the birds that are sort of just happen to be flying into their tree or whatever, or to even just have a pot plant if you're on the 35th floor of a block of apartments, or to just sort of go out and talk to the stars, to the night sky, to just begin to build relationship, you know, like, and to talk, like, you know, to just sort of say, you know, like, wow, I can't even begin to imagine what your reality is, star that I'm looking at, you know, but I feel connected to you right now in this moment. In fact, I'm really drawn to the mystery of how I'm down here, and then you're all, and the distance that you're actually a son, like my son, like, wow, you know, and I'm so tiny, and yet here I am in relationship with you right in this moment, you know, or to your neighbor, you know, it's like, and that they're as complex as you, you know, and they're as dark as you, and they're as light as you, and they're as ignorant as you, you know, and how beautiful. So, you know, that's the thing, is to also just work with what is. Like, it's no good, like, people, you know, very rare that people are going to get an opportunity like I had as a young man to have that exposure to, because they've all passed away now, those people. But also work with people who's had completely lost culture, Aboriginal people, but the spirit was absolutely there. But the spirit's in you. It's in, you know, like, we're all custodian. I can tell you this, the ones that had the most, the Indigenous people who were the strongest in connection with culture didn't see color. They saw spirit. And so, you know, I was at a Sundance, and the American Indian movement, the radical arm, came in to try to close down the Sundance because there were white people at it. But then they saw who was running it, which was some of the real heavyweights from the Lakota Sioux, you know, like major kind of like medicine men and Sundance chiefs and things. And of course, they just, you know, out of respect for their elders, you know, and the ones that actually were their teachers and everything, they just pull back. Because I went in very, very deeply into the culture, but it was because it was under the invite of the oldest ones who were unquestioned in their knowledge, etc. And they, you know, they saw, you know, that I had deep respect for them, and, you know, there wasn't that, and I think that, you know, I think that's what Darvis is talking about, you know, that part that, you know, we are all spiritual beings, you know, having a human existence.
Mhm.
And so's everything. You know, you go to a traditional Inupi, like a sweat lodge. Grandfathers are the stone people, you know, are the ones, you know, and the fire is, you know, they're the grandfathers. And they are live beings. And you go to peyote ceremonies, you know, that go all night, and the peyote ceremonies are the roadman who's running the ceremony takes his instructions from the chief peyote, from the actual cactus. The peyote cactus that's placed on the center of the altar is the one that's running the ceremony. You know, they are absolutely, I mean, and, you know, just about all of the peoples, you know, that use nature and plant medicine and things like that, there's an awareness that sort of the consciousness is that, you know, there isn't this hierarchies of consciousness, that everything is there to teach us, you know. And that's a completely different, and learning to listen, everybody's capable of that. And as, you know, like all the work I've done on transformation, we just take people to the wild places, to the bush. You know, we used to do a lot of father-son rites of passage camps in those 14 years of taking people out to be with the Aboriginal elders and to do work with them. It's incredible the difference that's made in wild places. And I tell you, it's even stronger in places where the law is still strong and where the ceremonies are still conducted. But this is the really important thing, is the earth loves us to bring back our own ceremonies, you know, by our presence and by doing things in country. You know, that's gold, because the land responds. You know, we used to do these ceremonies. At the end of them, almost every time on the last day, it'd start to rain, and the country was so pleased to have had ceremony done on it that the blessing would come. Or it's like vulnerability and tears, you know, like the Native Americans say that, you know, our tears are healing for the earth. You know, when that's like, you know, that's so, you know, I really think it's important that people don't feel like, you know, I've got to go to an Aboriginal community, or I have to, you know, like, just step outside, even in a city, you know, like, look for that tree, you know, look for that plant, look for that little park. That's why parks are so precious. You know, that's why, go down to the harbour, just, you know, go to the beach, you know, and, you know, things still happen. Like, you know, yesterday we lost a 19-year-old kayaker here in Tasmania. He went on his own initiation. You know, he set out by kayak to go and to have an experience in nature, and he died. And that's important, you know, that we don't equally, you know, realize the power of nature. And that includes pandemics. You know, we are engaged in a global initiation at the moment, and that's the pandemic, and it's climate change, and it's, you know, these are major initiations. You know, you don't have to go off to an Indigenous community to get initiated. You know, mental health is a major initiation. You know, not being able to get supported with mental health, you know, that's an initiation for some young people. Youth suicide, you know, like, is major death initiations that are happening, you know, and it's because, and until, you know, we become connected and that our culture shifts to a culture of connection instead of a culture of separation, you know, then that's what we're going to continue to deal with. And the implications are going to get harder.
Absolutely. And I think one of the parts of that is giving people some tools, because I think one of the major things that's an obstacle between people and nature is just not knowing how to engage in it. What do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do when I go out there? And so at the moment, one of the things that I'm doing as a job is I'm running rites of passage for men. So it's a group of 7 men over a 6-month journey, going out into the wild once a month and culminating in an 8-day solo, like at the end where we go up into the Tarkine. And the biggest thing that I can do is do the best job that I can of teaching them how I connect with the landscape. So it's exactly what Ranald was saying. It's just like the octopus, the tree, the mulberry, the tiny little things. And the one tool for those people who are out there watching this is, if you carry out your cornerstone kind of life question, whatever it is at the moment, take that question out. And I do this kind of intention stone process where I stick it was taken from an Aboriginal woman that I met years ago, where I stick like a stone in my mouth, and that stone is then imbued with my prayer and my question. And then when I remove the stone from my mouth, it carries the saliva and my DNA. And then I grab that stone, and when I throw and give that stone to the landscape, I imagine when it hits the ground, it shoots through the internet of the earth, which is otherwise known as mycelium. It shoots through and communicates to that landscape. This is my intention. I'm coming out here to learn. Please teach me. And then I just let myself wander, and I find myself sitting somewhere. And last time I found myself sitting next to this nondescript little peppermint gum. It was kind of burnt. It had a fork like this, and this bit was dead and that bit was thriving. And that's all that I needed. And so then I sat and I journaled and I tuned into that tree, and I'm like, what's it teaching me? And this bit had died, but then it got to this fork in the road, and it shot that way toward the sun. And there's been a month worth of reflection in that for me. So I sat down and I journaled from what I call the wild me, that part of me that I am part of that tree. So as the tree, how do I respond to Darvis's life question as this tree? As this tree, Darvis, this is what I recommend that you do. And then journal first person as the tree. As the tree, I reckon you should do this. You should stop investing in dead pathways. You should grow toward the light. Always go toward the sun. That's where the growth is. Light, move towards sun. Don't keep on investing in dead wood. And there's always a fork in the road in every moment. There's never a dead end. So my entire monthly meditation practice has been focused around that one simple little tree. But it could be a rock, it could be anything it could be the ocean, it could be the clouds. As that thing, how would I respond to my primary question?
We had this. Sorry, go Darvis.
Yeah, it's for me, it's about shift of identity. How do I get out of this human-centric, this is me, this constitutes me, to a broader ecological identity and what's the difference? Ultimately we are this broader identity, and we get sick when we forget it. That's what Ranald was saying. We come back into this monoculture identity. But the problem with that is that we're an ecological identity. And going into landscape reminds us of that.
Yeah, and it's like and becoming the other, but also like the transition step to that. For example, like with a tree, I might get people to do what the trees do, which is that there is an incredible community happening subterraneanly where their root systems are. They're constantly exchanging nutrients. There are like mother trees that are directing, where nutrients are to go. They're looking out of, you know, even trees that have been cut down, they're being fed. So even just something like, you know, pick a tree, send your own roots down into that system. Don't just look from up here, but actually, so from the bottom of your feet, send your roots down and connect up to there. Through your fingers, connect with the leaves, right? So that you're now in relationship with it. Introduce yourself, you know, and, you know, and when you're going into new country, you know, do it all the time. Like where I live in a forest, but I'm talking all the time to, you know, and, you know, make a lot of jokes about huggers, but like I go up to these huge stringy barks, you know, and I hug them and I say, I am so grateful to be part of your community. You know, I am so grateful that you continue to stand strong, even in these 100-kilometre-hour winds. And so you don't fall on my little house, which they could. They're really close. They're all around me. And, you know, and when I go away, you know, like I ask them, will you look after my place and everything? And I just am constantly giving thanks to Kunyani, this mountain that I'm sort of like right on the spine of. You know, I just constantly, you know, give thanks to it. And it's in the West, you know, which to the Native Americans is the medicine place. And I go out to my, you know, like the tree, you know, where I've got a living altar and things, and just constantly just talk to my country, you know, that I just feel so blessed to be in. But you could do that anywhere. And when I go to a new place, I always introduce myself to the country. And, you know, you go with Aboriginal people, that's what they do, you know, is they call out and talk to it. They throw stones into a water hole, you know, to speak to the rainbow snake that's in there, the guardian of that place, to let them know who they are, what they've come for, that they've got these people with them. You know, it's like we don't even talk to our neighbors half the time, you know, and it's because we've become, you know, so many, we've actually become quite
disconnected. Huh?
You know, it's like it's kind of irony now that many are now forced into isolation, and it might even be the antidote, you know, because people can't wait to connect, because and so suddenly we're being shown. So this is what isolation does. You know, and everyone's craving to be able to get back together and connect and things. Well, to just go beyond, you know, the human to connecting to and suddenly, oh my God, your mental health, my mental health, you know, is just off the Richter scale. And the more I make relationship and the more I accept as well, like I don't feed the part that's really dissatisfied with the world. I focus on the gratitude of how blessed. An Aboriginal man, he had something like 79 charges. He was alcoholic. He kind of, and his ancestral bones came up through the jail cell floor, and he got taken up to the stars and cut up and then put back together. He never drank again. And then he suddenly realized that he'd been identifying with the colonial sickness the whole time. He'd actually was so fucking angry, and so that he was actually stuck in the victim place. And he realized all the trees that had cut down, they still had the spirit in them, even if they were a door or whatever, or a piece of furniture, or even wood chips. That the spirit, you can't, you know, and he suddenly realized, oh my God, you know, I've just been identifying with a sickness. I'm going to start identifying with the spirit. And he became a major transformational figure for all the youth in his community down the South Coast, all the Yuin tribe. He became like an incredible stand. And that's, you know, something I realized that a lot of us do, is we actually, what we resist persists, because we feed all our energy into what we hate or what we can't stand, rather than, you know, what we love and what we're so grateful to be part of for. Feed that energy, and we start to, You know, like I try to send love to Donald Trump and have compassion for him, you know, because I feel like seeing a man who's 74 and is stuck in being a child, you know, I've got huge compassion for that, because that's me often as well. You know, I mean, I've been a grab 'em by the pussy man at times in my life, you know, where I've objectified women in that way, you know, and it's important for me to own that, recognize that, and forgive myself and forgive, you know, like, because otherwise it just all stays. That's why America is so divided. That's why, you know, is because no one's taking the position of other, you know, and that's what you do when you become an octopus or when you become that tree. You know, that's how we can learn. When you start building relationship with the other and you start seeing the world through that other, then you start to become less judgmental.
And that's why, Ranald, I think this is such a great time for honesty. You know what I mean? And I think you mentioned it throughout the conversation about, yes, being with the dolphins and beauty, but we need to own those dark side of ourselves, to be able to integrate them and to heal them. I mean, I love this time because I think we need to be honest, and it's such a difference. I mean, in regards to the way I see it, maybe even a decade ago, or 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, we are in a different place at the moment where people are a bit more ready to be true. And we are making a decision saying, well, I had enough of suffering and faking that everything was fantastic. Can I own my stuff and grow? And I think we're in a beautiful moment in history, in this evolution of consciousness, and great opportunity to own our shit, you know? I think it's a great time.
Yeah, and on the one hand, we've got this kind of, you know, what I see emerging in culture is that we've got this kind of really kind of space cadet kind of optimism in terms of, you know, like everything is light and everything is love. And on the other hand, we've got like this kind of dark shadow sexuality stuff emerging, like the Ista work, like where, you know, like the tantric realms and that stuff starting to become more kind of come online as a more mainstream thing. And in reality, you know, both of them are perfectly valid and reflective of the complexity of the universe. The light and the shadow is an aspect of myself, and it's an aspect of everybody. I really love like Ken Wilber's work in integral theory, where he kind of weaves, like, you know, weaves everything together into a matrix of complexity, and says that as long as we leave anything out, we're taking a partial view of reality. And that's why for me, like that sense of wild ecological identity is recognizing, you know, the deep complexity in each one of us, and that ownership of needing to create, like Ranald was saying before, that the ownership of needing to create containers. So that, I mean, I see it so much with this kind of like stuff with Donald Trump. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like he's just a human being. You know, we've projected so much power onto the man. We're spending so much time projecting anger, frustration, or whatever at Donald Trump. Just create something yourself. You know, get over the idea that this guy has power. Like, this guy has power because you're giving him your attention. Like, he's just a human being. And one of the fellas at the men's gathering one year, and I'm not sure if you remember this, Ranald, said he interviewed like an old fellow who'd been a psychologist for 45, 50 years. And he said, what were the main things that you learned in your practice of psychology for that period of time? And he said 2 things. He said, number 1, we're far more complex than we think. And number 2, there's no such thing as an adult. You know, And I love that, because it's that recognition of our continual need for disclosure of vulnerability and authenticity and staying freaking human. You know, definitely probably the most powerful wild experience I had was with my old man. My dad's 75 and he comes to the men's gatherings, and we did a vision quest in the Tarkine. And I sold it to these guys of like, January, it's going to be paradise down on the Huskisson. We're going to have this wicked, it's 8 days. We'll be bathing in the sun. Guys came from the UK, from Czech Republic. You know, everyone was like, woo, we're going to wild paradise. It was fucking rain, hail, and brimstone the entire time. It was insane. It was terrifying. We got stuck. The guy that was leading the Vision Quest, leads Vision Quest in the UK, and he departed saying, oh, I hate the fucking Tarkine, Darvis. We got stranded on the other side of the river for 5 days. It flooded. We almost drowned trying to cross the river on the way back. And that insanely difficult conditions of like horizontal rain the entire time was one of the most memorable experiences of my entire life. You know, that time stuck, and we had to get rescued, stuck on the other side of this river with my old man, was priceless, and we'll never forget that. And we forged this extraordinary bond of solidarity and resilience over that period of time. And then all the men, even the men who rescued us, who had to break their quest, they weren't even pissed off. They were like, this was awesome. We got to rescue you. You know, we got to be heroes. I'm like, yeah. You know, and it was far from what would be called a pleasant experience. It was the opposite of a pleasant experience. It was a bloody nightmare, but it was amazing.
But this is who we are, though. As we said, you know, our beautiful friend John Molang that says, don't believe that your shadow is somewhere else. Let the shadow stand by your side and make peace with it. And that's that beautiful vulnerability, particularly in men's work that obviously that we're involved with, is be that child again to some degree. And when you talked about immersing yourself, be that tree. I mean, as we are, and I'll use the phrase, Darvis, as we pretend to be adults, we lose our inner child. And I think that's something beautiful when we potentially connect with nature, is you can get a child to make monkey noises, to pretend they're a tree, to pretend they're an octopus. But for some reason, as we grow, we lose that sense of adventure and that sense of fun, and along with it, probably the disconnection with nature. Yeah. I mean, I had this beautiful experience the other week where I have a walking meeting basically, and I had 3 meetings back to back. But I went to a local park here, and then in between one of the meetings, a cockatoo decides to just sit on a rock in front of me, and I just talked to this cockatoo. Oh, you can enjoy our meeting, blah blah blah. And of course, when I hooked into the meeting, people were like really jealous of the view that I had. And that's a really interesting way to talk about tools, is to have that sense of adventure, have that sense of fascinated child that's in awe of the nature, in awe of that little ladybird that hops onto your hand. Like it's so simple, a bit like what Ranald was saying, is don't think you need to be like a guru in Nepal or some sort of monk where you have to start your enlightenment at that point. There's so many special, beautiful moments that as a child would look at these things.
Yeah. And there's a really simple way to get it. I was just going to say quickly that it's a slight delay. I just wanted to say that a really great way for anyone in their local area to find something to connect with is just to explore where their edge of discomfort is. You know, like if I was to go for a walk down to that park, would that take me slightly out of my comfort zone? Yep. Okay, then, and the principle being there, you know, excessive comfort causes disease. We don't want to be excessively comfortable. You know, the practice of being comfortable with discomfort is a really, really healthy practice.
Definitely, and that's great what you said, because sometimes there's so much pressure in protecting that comfort that you're not even comfortable. You know what I mean? Like protecting the security. Oh my God, don't let the security move, because then, you know, something so it's such an illusion.
Yeah.
Such an illusion. But what I was gonna say, bring the magic. Bring the magic and the wonder, you know what I mean? This is the idea, you know. It's we're just here for a short time, really, enjoying this planet. Why not allow ourselves to just enjoy it and bring more joy? I mean, we sort of I don't know, we think that becoming adults is we have to be serious and we have to be responsible, and look where all this is taking us, you know. I mean, look what's happening to our families, to our bodies, to our world. So we need to bring wonder and joy and see whether we can do it better doing it that way.
And to our children.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see kids riding bikes anymore, which is, it's rare. But that's all that I saw as a kid. We're just always on our mountain bikes.
Climb trees.
Climbing trees. Yeah.
Swinging off a rope into the river.
Absolutely. Swinging off ropes into rivers, building cubby houses.
You know what I think's interesting too, that I've seen, and I just went to a men's retreat on the weekend, is the honouring of so when you have a meal, for example, and you just place your hands over it and you honour the journey of that meal to your plate. It's such a beautiful thing to watch and a beautiful thing to do. It's like honouring nature. It's gone through a whole process, or whether it's process or whatever, but it's come to you. And I would imagine, Ranald, that the Indigenous culture that that is very much part of their honouring of the land.
Yeah, well, they certainly there's really strong laws around food preparation, around division of food, you know, around what's left and what's, you know, but also incredible knowledge of when to hunt certain things. You know, it's like things like, you know, I noticed things like when that yellow flower's out, that's when the goannas are fat. So when that yellow flower comes out, that's when you hunt goanna. Murrinjulk, you know, stingray, you know, like is, you know, that's when their liver is at its best. You know, so all of that kind of extraordinary complexity. And also just that, you know, you mentioned the magic. I mean, that was the other thing for me that was truly extraordinary. Was, you know, there were times when my head absolutely exploded at ceremonies when, you know, things like, you know, I just see things like, you know, that, you know, what's happening now? Oh, they're singing the stingray in. And I go, okay, right. And then suddenly it'd be like sort of, so what's happening now? Like, you know, and the song's kind of building and building and building. And so now they're calling in the main stingray, the boss one. And suddenly this dark shape had suddenly come into the creek entrance. And then suddenly the lead dancer would just spear it. And then everyone would sort of like, all the women and kids would suddenly be under blankets, and then men's business would happen with that. And then suddenly, like, everyone had kind of come up, and then they're in hunting all the stingray, and there'd be like 60 stingray there, just all going around. You never see anything like that. And, you know, of course, my little cultural sort of mind is complete. But I would say, but how, you know, like, but how do you know they're going to come? Like, you know, and all of this, and then say, but that's what the ceremony's for, you know, and, you know, that's the great tragedy, is that level of mystery, etc. There's just no recognition of that. You know, when the first, you know, Australia was kind of like invaded, all that was seen was this incredible lack of buildings, of, you know, like just, you know, and I remember one redneck station manager saying to me something like, well, that was a great contribution, a stick that came back. You know, like there's just absolutely, because, you know, we had deified this extraordinary material culture, you know, then, you know, it's just come in and say, well, they're primitives. You know, there's just, you know, I knew men who could speak 11 languages, you know, who understood the law for a rain, you know, like, and had a knowledge of songs and song lines and country and place to an extraordinary level, which allowed them to cover huge areas, to interact, to help out in ceremonies over huge distances away. Just this extraordinary complexity that went completely unrecognized. You know, the fact that, and so much of the time was dedicated to connection, whereas we've created a culture that is dedicated to what can I get? What can my company get? How much profit can we make? You know, it's just this constant, you know, and so Terra Nullius came about as a result of just this. It's so inferior, you know, like they don't even qualify as people. And, you know, and that's why they never got a vote until 67, until the referendum, etc. You know, just, yeah. So
I think it's interesting you're talking about ritual. I mean, when the east coast of Australia was burning, I mean, we've had not much rain in Australia for how many years? And when you talked about the magic and there was a global intention to bring rain to Australia, and how powerful that indeed was. And we're starting to talk about connecting and as a community and what we can do, and whatever people's beliefs are, whether they call it a prayer. I mean, I think in the end they call it an intention, but how beautiful
Darvis
it was to see.
Dancing for rain, you know, getting people to dance for rain. Yeah, that's the thing. You know,
I'm a bit aware of the time.
Yeah.
I'm a bit aware of the time, but so we're probably going to be now closing it down soon.
Okay. I mean, I'm writing a movie at the moment about a young 12-year-old boy who is trying to make it rain to save his father's farm and, you know, and heal his relationship with his father. And in the end, the only thing that makes it rain is his father's tears. When they finally father and son are united, you know, and both are crying in each other's arms, and then finally the heavens open with rain, you know. So yeah. Yeah. Okay, how do we wrap up?
I guess that this is what it's all about. You know what I mean? It's about our connection to our own nature, our connection to our world, but mainly also, apart from our connection to our own nature, our connection to our families, healing our families, healing our relationships. I mean, there's so much work for all of us. And I guess that the opportunity also for all of us to see things differently. Are we able to see things differently than I've never seen them before? So this, you know, this idea of hugging a tree or going, you know, going into nature and doing different things that I've never done before. Am I willing to try it? Because this is not about believing in someone else's experience. And this is what we always say with all the conversations that we have, you know. The idea is, can I do it myself? And even talking about rituals and the power of rituals. I mean, I remember once I did just a small ritual. We were moving houses. And because I'm a marriage celebrant, I know as well, I was taught and I was reminded about the importance of rituals. I have forgotten really. And I could tell that my kids were very unsettled in the new house. And I thought, okay, what can I do to make it a bit more, what can I do? What ritual can I do? And all I did was a love heart. And we all color in the love heart. And the love heart meant, okay, this is the new beginning. We're in a new house. And it was amazing how we all settled in the new house. So when we talk about rituals, we can make it as simple because it's all about the intention, isn't it?
Yeah.
So hopefully people can take this, you know, from today that it is in our hands. You know, it is our choice.
Mm.
If we had enough suffering, can we bring a bit more joy?
Yeah.
So yeah, just really love having you guys. We've had probably some friends of yours, Stig,
Yes.
Timothy Smith, John T. Williams, a handful of
Brad.
people that joined us today. Brad, sending love to you, brother. Look, this could, maybe we should have made these 2 hours, but I so feel blessed that not just Nancy being my partner for life, but just to have met both yourself, Ranald, and Darvis, and to share your experience and wisdom, but also just have that lovely foundation for the series of workshops, being Mother Earth and Father Earth, Pachamama, Pachatata in Spanish, you know, and well, not in Spanish, but and so just, for anyone that this will be available, this live stream will still be available on our Awaken the Senses page. Monday, we've got Veronica Sanchez is going to talk about the pineal gland activation and a third eye chakra, which is going to be fascinating once again. There are so many ways that we can heal. There are so many ways that we can transform our lives. It's just taking some responsibility and integrating whatever information or whatever you've taken from today's discussion. Just breathe it all in.
And I'd like to acknowledge you guys for creating this as a ceremonial space. This is the creation of spaciousness in day-to-day life. You know, this is the integration of present community. There's my dear friend Ranald. You know, you guys, getting to know you guys deeper. You know, creating intimacy and space and ceremonial space in culture is now converted online. And I just want to acknowledge you guys for having a crack at doing that, which has opened up this conversation. And I've learned a lot more listening to Ranald's stories. Like, there's a bunch of that stuff that I'd never heard before. So just having that one-on-one intimate stuff is priceless. And this is now stored for all time. It's just, it's beautiful. So really, from the heart, thanks for everything that you guys are doing to play your part.
Thanks so much.
To you.
I'll be down in Tasmania sometime.
Yes. We'll be doing a walk.
Yeah.
And anything else that you want to say, Ranald, before we move on? We could also.
Yeah, I just want to say to sort of everybody that it's so the hardest thing I think for us to get is that we are already all that we need to be, that we have all the resources that we could possibly want, but the hardest thing is believing it. And that's really what the journey is the journey is to, you know, and even the awakened, all of the awakened mystics, they literally get to the stage where they realize that, you know, the small self is an illusion and that basically we are everything. So what more could anyone want to be than everything? And we're all already that. But our journey is to finally believe it, because we experience it, not as a cognitive sort of thing, but we actually come to experience it. And hopefully tonight has been a stepping stone for all of us to get a little bit more of that sense.
Yes,
So I feel very connected.
Thanks, Ranald.
Thank you so much from our hearts to yours, and definitely we'll be connecting again with you, and hopefully we'll be going to Tasmania, and we invite people to get in contact with you guys to do the activities that you're doing, to join into what people are doing, because sometimes people go, well, I don't have any ideas, but yes, there are many people doing stuff. And it's just a phone call away or a text away. So thank you for being there for people. Yes.
Okay.
Pleasure.
We'll put the link of Wild Walkers to Darvis in our chat here as well. So send some people that way, and looking forward to your film,
Yeah.
Ranald.
Okay.
Legends.
Okay.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you so
Cool.
much. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you again on Monday at 8 p.m. for the pineal gland activation. So much love for everybody. Have a safe weekend. We're gonna say something.
Ciao.
Okay. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Thank you.